championship against the likes of Andrea Locatelli and perhaps particularly, you would argue, Alvaro Bautista. And again, the weekend started with Petrucci.
There's obviously a massive gap between Bulega and Petrucci in the championship, so it is just all about that top three in the standings. And Bautista's had the pace over Petrucci for much of the season, but he's had those mistakes, and Petrucci doesn't tend to make too many.
Jonathan Rea jumping out of the pit lane among the first riders making their way out onto the circuit at the beginning of free practice one. Of course, recently announced his intention to retire from full-time racing, and to some extent he's going to be relieved, I think, when the trial of riding the Yamaha is over, because it's just been a miserable spell for him, the most difficult, I think, undoubtedly of his career, and finds himself down in P15 in FP1 earlier on today. And that's the proof of why he's made the decision that he has, because he doesn't want to find himself on machinery with which he can't be competitive, and that's the situation he's found himself in with Yamaha.
Yeah, it really is. It's unfortunate the way that things have gone for Johnny on the Yamaha. It's obviously just been a situation that hasn't worked for either party, and I think last year was one of those situations where I think Yamaha probably thought they were getting something a little different than what arrived, and Johnny thought he was going to be on a different situation than what he got onto as well, and it just hasn't been a marriage that's worked. And it's really unfortunate that that's how Johnny's full-time career is going to come to an end. But you can also think about it that in 2 years' time, is anyone going to remember he was on the Yamaha? Probably not. They're going to look at the rider that was able to win those 6 World Championships for Kawasaki, a guy that's been able to win 122 World Championship races. Quite the record he's been able to amass.
And when we when we come to the end of this season and we reflect on these last 2 years, there's going to be a lot of what ifs, as there always would be. But I think the biggest what if is, what if he'd stayed put, remained at Kawasaki? Obviously, there was a bit of itchy feet there, because the Kawasaki was coming to the end of its development cycle, the end of its potential. It was getting harder and harder for him to challenge for race wins. He'd only had the rare opportunity in 2023 to challenge at the front of the field, and he makes that move away. And yet you look at Alex Lowe's and the really strong number of podiums he was able to have last year, and you feel that Rea could potentially have been challenging for top 3 in the championship last season, and then maybe the motor might have been a reset for him, and could potentially have been what he needed to reinvigorate himself.
Yeah, the thing for Johnny is, and he said this to me 2 years ago whenever I first caught wind of the Yamaha situation early in the year after Top Racket signed for BMW, and he said it's either going to be I retire or I leave. He couldn't spend another year or 2 years on the Kawasaki, and it was just too difficult for him to go to those rounds knowing how tough it was to be able to find that competitiveness again. He was ready to walk away from Superbike racing if it meant that he was going to have to stay on that Kawasaki, because he knew it was going to be impossible to win another championship on it, and that was what his goal was. The move to Yamaha reinvigorated him for a while, but obviously it just hasn't worked out.
Yeah, and in hindsight, you'd say that the performances he was putting in at the end of his spell with Kawasaki, obviously much superior to what he's been able to do with the Yamaha package that clearly just doesn't suit him, and which he hasn't been able to get the best out of either.
Yeah, obviously, if he had have stayed on, he would have had better results on the Kawasaki, probably would have finished 2nd or 3rd in the world last year, would have won some more races. But as I said, I just don't think he would have stayed on for it. Such was his motivation to have that change.
And the other second part of what might have been is, who knows what he would be able to do next season on a Ducati, because you hear and all the comments and the press conference as well yesterday from Jonathan Rea, and still you feel he's got that fire inside him. He's still got that desire to be successful and the desire to be winning, and a past winning combination with the best bike on the grid. I think it's a shame for the sport that we don't get to see what might have been if Jonathan Rea could have been on a Ducati next season.
Yeah, Johnny's career is one of what might have been as well, because obviously the big thing has always been what would happen if he went to MotoGP, and lots of other question marks about Rea's career. Ultimately, he's had the greatest career we've ever seen in World Superbikes. He is going to retire as the greatest Superbike rider we've ever seen. He's just at that transitional period from being his era to between Toprak's time and then that point afterwards as well. And Johnny's dominance was for such a long time that it's easy to forget just how great he was during that Kawasaki era, because he went into that team and it was a team centered around Tom Sykes. Tom could have won 3 World Championships in a row for them, and instead Johnny went in, and from the first round at Phillip Island, it was his team, and that was Johnny's real power, was to create that team atmosphere centered around him. Very similar to what you see with Marc Marquez in MotoGP, where he's gone into Pecco Bagnaglia's team and he's forced everyone in Ducati to want to work with him rather than with Pecco. Johnny was able to do that at a time whenever that team was very much centered on Tom Sykes. And you also have to look at it as well, that was a bike and a development structure that was Tom and Marcel Goinker, and then suddenly it was JR and Carrariva that were leading the way for them. It was a massive change that's easy to forget now.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously you latch on to what's happened more recently perhaps, but when I've been reading all of the press since Ray's announcement, everyone's pointing to 2019 as his greatest season, greatest achievement, with Alvaro Bautista stringing together all of those wins, Ray coming from over 60 points behind and taking the title. And yet, in a sense, the greatest achievement, and a lot of riders will cherish most dearly their first world title, but that first season for Ray on the Kawasaki, probably the biggest achievement, isn't it? As you say, Sykes a world champion, could potentially have been 3 in a row. Ray comes in and obliterates him by over 100 points in the first season on that bike, and you only need to look at the transition from Kawasaki to Yamaha to see how difficult it is often to make an immediate impact when you make a change of manufacturer. So yeah, perhaps arguably that first season is the biggest triumph of his career.
It's also an indication of how different the championship is now compared to 2015 as well, because whenever I first came to work in World Superbikes full-time was 2016. Johnny won his championship and it was him against Chaz Davis. Tom Sykes was there as well. But ultimately, if you were having a bad day, you were still finishing on the podium. Now if you're having a bad day, you could be finishing 10th, 12th position, and that's the difference right now because it's so close. Qualifying has become more and more important. You think about the amount of times when we had the reverse grid positions, or the podium finishers went to start 9th, 8th and 7th on the grid, and still within a lap, JR's at the front of the field, within a few laps, Chaz Davis is at the front of the field. Now if you start on the 3rd row of the grid, you really have very little chance of being able to make that progress. So that shows as well just how different the championship is now and the field strength is. And that's not to take anything away from what we saw 10 years ago. It's just the change in dynamics, and it's good for us because we've got so many riders that come through the championship now that are all really fast, competitive riders all the way down the order. And you see that whenever typically we look at to see who's 15, 16, 17, 18th position, and it could be a guy that's won MotoGP races and they're still having to try and fight it out to just get in the points.
I completely agree with you. To me, though, it also proves that there's been a generational change or a baton handover, because if you put Toprak Razgatlioglu 9th on the grid now, how long before he gets into the podium positions? Probably a lap to be top 5, 2 laps to be top 3. I wouldn't bet against it, certainly.
And Budic is similar as well. We've seen it where he's had to come through the order a few times after Super Bowl races, and he makes that progress within a few laps as well. But I think that when you look at Johnny at his best, it was something to behold. And you were lucky, Al, you came in at the right time to be able to see some of that magic as well. And it was magic whenever you look at what Ray was able to achieve. And it's also that thing of, it shows just that longevity for him. He's also 38 years of age, and he's been a Superbike rider for the best part of 20 years whenever you think back to whenever he was a BSB rider. And I remember being at Mondello Park whenever he took his pole there as a 17-year-old, and it was mind-blowing to see someone come in and do that. And that was ultimately the turn of speed that we saw from him year on year as well.
Heading up towards the 10-minute mark in free practice 2. This is Xavi Vierke, and unfortunately he's gone down at the Lycée complex. The yellow flag's out through there. Looks as though he's got back on board, and thankfully it's only a short sprint to pit lane. So fingers crossed he won't lose too much time in this session. But that's a shame for Vierke after his job well done in free practice 1. Came home this morning in 4th place.
Yeah, and for Xavi, see that he should come straight back into the pits after that crash, and bit of a shame that he's had that incident here, but at least it's early in the session. He'll come back in, he can still do his long run. Didn't look like the bike was too badly damaged from that crash, quite a slow speed crash.
Yes, I've been advised that he's made his way back in. So Razgatlioglu it is who leads the way, 1 minute 36.075 for him. So already the pace significantly faster than it was earlier on this morning. Alex Lowe's second fastest, 0.2 of a second down. Sam Lowe's 0.3 of a second down on your leader. Nicolo Bulliger currently in 6th and Alvaro Bautista 8th.
Just to say for Top Rack as well, that's around about 0.05 of a second slower than the fastest time we had from the 3 practice sessions last year as well. So good pace right from the start here. We had damp patches this morning, that's why they were probably a little bit slower than they would have expected from the start of that session.
Yeah, so it's Razgatlioglu who leads the way at the moment. Andrea Locatelli 4th fastest. For the riders who haven't managed to improve on their times from earlier on today, Rinaldi Vierke, who obviously has now made his way back into the pits, as you can see, Rabat and Andrea Iannone.
Yeah, and obviously we saw earlier on as well Sergio Garcia out there in the number 10 Honda, teammate to Xavi Vierge this weekend, and be interesting to see what Garcia can do. He's already had a couple of days testing that bike at Aragon, and wouldn't be too surprised if we see him getting a few more races on that bike this season as well. But good effort from Garcia in the Aragon test. Tougher now this weekend. Lost a lot of track time this morning.
Just watching Alvaro Bautista make his way through the final sector. Bautista actually making a lot of ground in the first sector of that last flying lap. Loses it later on in the lap. Comes across half a second down on Razgatlioglu. But we saw in free practice 1 earlier on today. Each different sector seemed to suit a different rider and a different package.
Yeah, and Bautista in Sector 1, Top Rack Sector 2, Petrucci in Sector 3, Top Rack in the final sector as well in this session so far. But you can see for Danilo there on the number 9 machine, just really manhandling that bike as well. You can see just how different he is on the bike compared to someone like Alvaro Bautista. And for Petrucci, it's always a case trying to bend that bike to his will, whereas for Bautista, we see it where he almost floats from corner to corner whenever he's at his best on it.
And how is that style for Petrucci going to transfer to the BMW? Because a lot of the talk at the start of this weekend has been, you know, the team trying to find someone a little bit like Razgatlioglu. You'd almost feel like it's clutching at straws to find someone like Toprak who's going to deliver that level of performance on the BMW. But Petrucci is the man that they have signed up, and obviously they've still got a second seat pending. But Petrucci is the first name to be announced, and is that, you know, is the style for Petrucci going to be close enough to get enough from the bike that he can get podiums on the BMW?
I think it's just going to be really difficult to tell until he gets onto the bike. I would struggle to see how he'll be able to meet the expectations that he's going to go in and win races on that bike. He hasn't won that many races on the best bike on the grid with the Ducati. Obviously he had 3 race wins in Cremona last year. For Petrucci, what can be a realistic target? Probably top 5s, and if he's able to do that, then he's doing a decent job for me. He's not going to go in and do what Top Rack's done, just because I think it's going to be too difficult to jump onto that bike as it is right now. I think if he jumped onto last year's bike with the super concession frame, it's a very different story. But when you look at what Van der Mark's done on that bike, I think you can see just how difficult it is to get the bike stopped, get the bike turned. It just always seems to want to push the rider wider and wider through the corner, and that just makes it more and more difficult for the guy on the bike to be able to really generate the lap time. Petrucci might jump onto it and completely gel with it, but on the basis of what we've seen from other riders on that BMW, I think it's going to be a tough one.
Toprak Razgatlioglu proving just how tough it is to match him in World SBK. He's the first rider into the 1 minute 35s, a 1:35.860. That is more than 0.4 of a second faster than anyone else has gone in Magny-Cours here today. 3 riders then still who have failed to improve on their times from this morning: Vierke, Rabat and Iannone. And the most notable incident of this free practice 2 session this afternoon has been that spill for Xavi Vierke. Dave, what's the latest?
Thanks, Alex. Yes, I'm in the Honda pit box now. Just had a quick look at the machine. It doesn't look too bad, actually. It looks like just some minor damage to the fairings and the handlebars. It's just being worked on in the pit box. Hopefully we'll see Xavi Vierge back out before the end of this session. There's no major damage, thankfully. Other bit of news is that it looks as though the BMotors and also Sam Lowe's on the Mark VDS Ducati went straight into long runs at the start of the session, looking at their pit boards. So they've gone into what look like race simulations. We'll have further updates on them a little later on.
Thanks, Dave. Yes, Sam in particular had a really good long run earlier on today as well, before you would assume a change of tyres for the sort of final few minutes and the last half dozen laps. So plenty of laps under his belt today so far.
Yeah, spent a bit of time with Sam over the course of the summer break from Hungary onwards, and he is probably the most relaxed that I've seen him. I've known Sam for about 10 years, from whenever he was in the Moto2 World Championship. This is the most relaxed I've seen him in a long time. Everything seems to just gel for him and the Mark VDS team. His work with Gorka has been really good. That crew chief change has made the world of difference for him. And they're able to work in a very methodical manner to be able just to do their long runs, but also when they have to find the pace for one lap, the pace is there and the comfort level on the bike is there. And for Lowe's, we've been able to see a big step forward into year 2. This is the kind of performances that we expected to see from him. He's a guy that has won a lot of Moto2 races, challenged for championships, Supersport World Champion, and now we're starting to see it on the Superbike that he's able to bring that same approach to it. And what's been interesting as well, when you speak to Ducati with the new bike for next year, they're really keen for Lowe's to be more and more involved in the winter testing program, development of that bike, to be able to get it ready for next season.
Obviously, Sam's been within that Mark VDS family for a while, through Moto2, and then bringing him across into Superbikes. And it kind of made sense for all parties, I guess, to continue and maintain the status quo rather than making any changes. But certainly he would have been a worthy addition alongside Nicolo Bulliga on the Aruba bike.
Yeah, for sure. Like, speaking to people within Ducati Corsa in Bologna, they've said that he was on the shopping list for them. They did make some discussions to see whether it was possible for him to move across, but ultimately for Lowe's, the right decision is to stay with Mark VDS, because that's where he's got the best package available for him, and certainly the right environment. And I think that given his experiences in the past, whenever he was a factory rider in MotoGP, I think he'll understand and know the importance of that right environment and being able to have the right people around him. And for Ducati, they've still got a top rider on their independent bikes. I think that when you look between now and the end of the season, Lowe's is going to earmark Aragon and Jerez. They're the 2 rounds where he really needs to step up, and he'll think that there could be a chance to be able to fight for a race win at those tracks. They're where he's always been at his best. So for him, that's what his target for the rest of the season has to be, to find a way to win a race. But easier said than done when you're up against Toprak and Bulliga at the front.
Well, as we've already heard, Dave Goddard is prowling up and down pit lane, and give us a little bit more reaction, Dave.
Yeah, so I mentioned Gorka Segura, crew chief for Sam Lowe's at Mark VDS. He's with me now. Gorka, a couple of long runs early on in the sessions today seems to be paying off for Sam with some good times this morning and this afternoon.
Yeah, so basically this morning in FP1 we worked with one set of tires. We choose the soft front option and the hard rear option, SC0. We do the long run because Sam obviously need in this circuit, especially after last year, need laps. But it went quite well. Sam did a great job, and for this afternoon we are trying a long run with the soft tire to see the tire wear and how the bike works with this tire.
Well, things have certainly improved. I know we had a bit of misfortune at his home round at Donington Park, but things have certainly improved for Sam since then.
Well, let's say we are doing the right steps forward in terms of performance. Donington, okay, we crashed, but the speed was there, everyone was there. Maybe sometimes we want a little bit more, but this is part of game, so just full trust on Sam, keep working, and the results are coming.
And of course there's the independent teams championship to think of as well. That's still pretty wide open at the moment.
Well, Petrucci is not, he's a little bit far, but yeah, we are trying our best to catch him.
Great stuff. Let's hope the improvement continues. Gorka, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the fact of the improvement from last year to this is evidenced by the fact that I think it's only 3 races that Sam has finished outside of the top 7 this season. Now, obviously there have been retirements, as we've said, where he's pushing or where, you know, incidents have happened and so on. But when he's finished, he's been in that lead group almost every time, and that was not the case last season. Struggling with injury, struggling with circuits he was less familiar with a very different look to our calendar compared to MotoGP. Manicur was a good example where it was a write-off last season. But here we are, 2025, and pretty much every circuit he's gone to, he's been right on the pace.
Yeah, the big part of that is that Gorka's come in and you're able to look at it with a fresh set of eyes, but also you're not looking at it from a Ducati Corsa set of eyes, because Ducatis like their bikes to be operated in a certain window, and not all riders like the bike in that window. And I think when you look at Sam's performances last year compared to this year, you can see that taking that bike away from where it was last year has really helped him. And a lot of times that's the crew chief's job, and that's why the crew chief becomes so important. And we can see for Toprak here as he makes his way across the line, Another fast lap time there at 36.2, which is faster than anyone bar Bulaga's gone in this session, and Toprak deep into his run. But when you look at that relationship that the rider has with the crew chief, it becomes critical, and it becomes a really important relationship where riders want to keep working with the same guys. That's why Toprak wants to bring Phil Marin over to MotoGP with him next year. We'll wait and see if that is the case. It's gone a little bit quiet on it lately, and Yamaha haven't confirmed one way or the other what's going to happen for Toprak and his team next year.
Yes, but we are starting to get the first whispers and first murmurations about possible changes of crew chief for next season. I know there's been a fair amount in the press just in the lead up to this round.
Yeah, we've obviously seen that Alvaro Bautista is going to leave Ducati. We knew that himself and Giulio Nava weren't going to work together next season anyway, but for Nava, it looks like he's gone to Yamaha for next year to work with Andrea Locatelli. That's also going to set a little bit of a chain reaction on as well, because Locatelli with Tom O'Kane, it looks like Tom's going to move to the other side of the pit box, but obviously for Jonathan Ray's crew, Yuri Perales has been the crew chief there. He might well be moving back towards Provec as well, seems to be the rumour around the paddock. So there's a lot of rider market seat changes. There's also the guy sitting beside the rider that could be moving around as well.
Yes, and inevitably those tend to be a little bit later in the season that those get discussed, because there's still some big official rides available for next season.
And there's one sort of chain reaction from that could be quite interesting, and it's if Yuri does go to Provec, what happens within Provec? What is his role within Provec? Because you could easily see a situation where Axel Bassani changes his crew chief, and then what happens to Marcel Dunker? Does he move to Kawasaki to be with Garrett Gerloff? And that would be a really interesting shift in the dynamics there as well. But it's one of those things where everyone can see the dominoes falling, and they can fall any number of ways. But for the rider market, that's probably the key thing for everyone to keep track of right now, and we'll see what happens there, because even someone like Ryan Vickers now in the number 17 machine, Vickers has had a few decent performances. Donington Park in Hungary, he was able to show an upturn in his speed, but needs to have those results now over the last 4 rounds, because there's a bit of talk that maybe he might be a little bit under pressure now for next season as well. Yeah,
much as he has a 2-year contract, obviously it depends on your performance as well, and there are always performance-related clauses. Reality is Ryan Vickers is down in 19th in the championship. Good news for him is, as you say, a bit of a step up in performance. I think I would include Misano in that bracket as well, where he looked a little bit better there, getting closer to the top 10. Donington Park could have been more actually, but for a bit of misfortune, he qualified so well in 7th. And then the opposite in Balaton Park had that great Superpole race with 7th position, but had only qualified down in 16th, so that limits what you can do in the weekend. It's just about putting it all together at one time at the moment, isn't it?
And that's one of the big challenges as well, because when you look at it, he's 19th in the championship standings. Jari Montala is quite a bit ahead of him in terms of points, but he's only a couple of positions ahead of him in the championship standings. Obviously Montala is going to be on the Barney bike next season alongside Alvaro Bautista, but for Ryan Vickers, he needs those couple of results between now and the end of the season to be able just to give everyone that reminder of just what he can do, because the speed is there. We saw that in the British Championship as well, but it's about having those good results, and Jari Montala had that in Phillip Island and another couple of strong performances in Portimao, whereas Vickers has kind of been a little bit more consistent through the season, but probably needs those highlights.
As we see into Andrea Ionone's pit box, there's obviously a problem for Iannone in this session, because he is not usually down in P22, and the team working on the bike. Iannone, perhaps not the best of circuits for him. He was P16 in FP1 earlier on today. It was one of those venues where he was not able to get the best out of himself last season either. So yeah, this is not working in Iannone's favour, that's for sure.
No, and you can see there for Iannone just limbering up as he gets ready to go back out, but he's only done half a dozen laps in this session. Still 20 minutes left, so enough time to be able to get in a decent run. We've got Toprak out there on his 14th lap, 15th lap of this session, and Toprak still putting in fast times. We'll see what it is whenever he comes across the line. Sam Lowe's out there doing the long run as well. Alex Lowe's out there on his 14th lap too. So we've got some riders out there trying to put in their longer runs, and for Sam last time around 37.0, so he's done all of his laps within round about that 6 or 7 tenths of a second of his fastest time, so decent long run pace for him. Toprak comes across the line at 36.1, which again is faster than anyone bar Nicola Bulaga out there, and that's 15 laps into this set of tyres.
We are past halfway mark now in free practice 2, and it's Toprak Razgatlioglu who leads the way. Bit of a quieter moment in this session because most of the riders have made their way back into the pits at the end of their first stint. Dave Goddard, back down to you.
Yes, down here at Yamaha with Nicolo Canepa, now a member of Yamaha management, of course. Nicolo, tell us how the weekend's gone for the team so far. First of all, it's all looking fairly positive.
Hello everyone, yeah. The weekend is going well so far. The weather is good and Locatelli seems to be already in very good shape. Started the session in F1 this morning really quickly. It's quick again this afternoon, so looks good.
Now, of course, the big news over the last few weeks is Jonathan Rea announcing his retirement. Did that come as a major shock to the team? Has it had any major effect, or was it more expected?
Yeah, well, Johnny is an absolute legend of this sport, and of course we wanted to wait for him for his decision and wait whether if he wanted to continue, to stop, to evaluate a different project with Yamaha before starting any negotiation with other riders. And of course I was hoping for him to continue, but I fully understand his choice, and we respect that. I believe he did great. He did something really great for the World Superbike in general, and now it's time to think about the future, for his future and the future of Yamaha as well. So we are starting to think now about his possible replacement.
And what possible replacements, whose names have been thrown around? We know that Chanon Chu has been doing some testing. Is he a possible candidate?
Yeah, well, I think that there is a few options on the tables right now. We didn't take any decision because, of course, Johnny took the decision of retire just last week. So we need a bit longer time to evaluate it, to understand which are the best options for Yamaha in World Superbike for next year, and we will see. Yeah.
No chance of a racing comeback yourself next year, then?
No, absolutely not.
Good stuff, Nicolo Canepa. Thank you very much for your time. Full of fun as ever.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, gents. Yeah, I think he might be relieved he's closed the chapter on that part. As for Jonathan Rea, I guess one thing coming out of that interview that we have glossed over in many respects, because we've been talking about the sporting aspects, what might have been, the greatness of his sporting success and so on, but there is also a family element there, isn't there? And if you're a part-time retired, at very least, rider, you're going to have more opportunities to do other things, to explore other parts of life and progress towards, ultimately, you don't go from being a 6-time world champion to instantly stopping, and unless you've got a plan for what your fulfillment in the next stage of life is going to be. So it might actually be the right thing for him on a personal front to work out the transition towards an eventual retirement from being on the bike.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones where he needs to just understand what's going to be best for him, and sometimes it's like any job, whenever you leave it, you suddenly need to see whether or not you miss it as well. And Johnny, obviously, whenever we get to Phillip Island next year, I'm sure at 4 o'clock in the morning he's going to be getting up to watch the race, to be able to see what's happening, and then over time you'll wait and see whether or not you miss a race here or there, and what you want to be able to see, and whether or not you want to be out there again. And for Johnny, obviously, that will be the decision that he'll have to look at down the line. But like you said, the family side, the personal side, it's very difficult to think of both whenever you're looking at it from the outside in. But for Johnny, he's certainly looked at it, and I think there's a weight off his shoulders, and he's been very relaxed this week. And speaking to him in the gap between Hungary until now, it was very clear that he had a decision to make, and that he had made the decision, and then he was very much at peace with the decision as well. And coming in to speak to media yesterday, he was probably as relaxed as we've seen him for a couple of years, really.
So Toprak Razgatlioglu comes in at the end of his first stint, and he is the fastest man in sectors 2 and 4. He is the fastest man on the lap overall by 0.2 of a second. Nicolo Bulliger now moving up into to second place, but strong effort that from Toprak Razgatlioglu once again, as you'd anticipate.
Yeah, almost every lap is faster than anyone bar Bulliger, and that is so impressive from Toprak. But more than anything, it just gives him that information, gives him that knowledge, because for Razgatlioglu with the BMW, he doesn't know what this bike is like in a race simulation here at Magny Course. That's really important data for him to gather.
Yes, of course, crashed out so early in the weekend a year ago. So tough task for Toprak Razgatlioglu, but I think the fact of the matter is the way he started today, it doesn't look like it's going to have any undue effect on his weekend. Very much in control thus far.
And you would have been surprised if it had a big impact on Toprak as well, because obviously whenever you come back here, he's got the memories of last year, but he's also got the memories of all those race wins he's had here and the good memories he's had at Magny-Cours. And for Razgatlioglu, it was clear he was focusing on that from the start of the weekend, and he's now very much just into normal race week mentality, and you can see him down there talking to Bill Marin, his crew chief, his electronics guys, and the rest of the team about what he wants the bike to do. They've got 15 minutes left in this session and enough time to make a small change now before he goes out again.
I think in the margins of that Razgatlioglu-Bulliger fight, there's the who else might be able to challenge for a race win in the final third of this campaign. And obviously we've talked about Sam Lowes, but the opportunities to beat both of them are so few and far between, both of them riding at such a high level, that very often it leaves us with a separate fight for third place, particularly in the second half of races.
Yeah, we've seen that through the course of this year, and when one of them's a little bit vulnerable, the other one steps up. And you can see here for Alex Lowes, a good comparison for his race pace compared to what we saw for Toprak. Toprak's pace went off to being around about 36.2. You can see there for Lowes, it's a bigger drop off obviously than that compared to Razgatlioglu, but look at lap 15, 36.3, and that's only a few thousandths of a second slower than his fastest time at the start of the stint as well. So shows that he's at least got that tyre pretty dialed in, and he'll expect that having that knowledge means that you're then able to make the next step forward from it as well when you get into race conditions. You know you can push a bit harder.
A couple of laps there that were much slower. Is that likely just an error where it's not worth pushing to try and hold on to it and you've rejoined, or is that backing off to then go again?
Sometimes you just get that bit of traffic and you then try and create a little bit of space to give yourself that chance to have the clear track in front of you, or you could have it where someone pits in front of you or anything like that. So typically the teams and riders know that there's going to be that bit of a discrepancy, but they can also factor that into their calculations, because they can look at the other three sectors from that lap. Maybe they were fast sectors and there was one sector that was slow, so you're able to make those small changes to it.
Garcia earlier on today was bottom of the pile other than Zakwan Zaidi, 139.673 earlier on today. 138.269 now for Garcia. That's 2.4 away from Toprak when he finished 2.74 from Toprak earlier on today. So just making steady progress, obviously a long way to go, but decent effort you'd have to say thus far for Garcia. As we pick up Andrea Iannone, missed a fair amount of the early stages of this session. He's trying to make up for lost time now. This will be his 10th lap, I think. And across the line moves up into 14th position. But this venue is a potential weak link for him, and we've seen nothing yet today to suggest that it will be otherwise in 2025.
Yeah, unfortunately for Iannone, this season's been a bit of a continuation of what we saw last year. We've had some high points, but we've seen some pretty disappointing weekends as well, and that's where for Iannone it is quite difficult to see where he's able to line up on the grid next year. And he's been pretty clear about it as well. If he doesn't have a factory seat, he'll retire rather than have another year of paying his way with the Go 11 machine.
And that would be a real shame as well, because it was a great story. The comeback last season, I think, was a success given the long spell out of the sport. Maybe optimistic people were expecting more, but a sportsman to be out for as long as he was and to come back and to be able to fight for podiums and have a race victory. This season in Phillip Island, Sunday in Phillip Island, my goodness, he looked like a title contender, and then nothing since. So it is a real shame, because the potential is obviously there.
The potential is there, but ultimately what we're seeing from Iannone in World Superbikes is what we saw from him in MotoGP as well. At his best, he can be one of the best in the world, but whenever he's not at his best, you almost forget about him, and that's the big issue for Iannone, is that finding that consistency. And obviously when you're on the independent bike, it's a different situation. When you're in a team like Go 11, it is more difficult than whenever you're on the factory bikes, but ultimately you need to show something to then give yourself the chance to be on those factory machines, like what we've seen from Petrucci and like what we saw from Rinaldi in the past when he was on the Go 11 bike.
just saw that graphic there about the new bike for Ducati coming for next season, and obviously Ducati never stop. They're all about development and technical innovation and so on, but they're also all about leading the main positions in the championship, and they're already doing that this year. So what's going to happen next year? You know, how many Ducatis at the top of the standings are we looking at, and how does that work out with the sort of balancing concept between the manufacturers in World SBK, when there's a manufacturer that obviously at the moment is superior to the others and investing well and bringing a new model next season?
Well, when you lose Toprak, you take away the guy that's number one right now, so Ducati will be number one, and they'll do exactly what they have to do with the new bike. They'll make that progress with it. It is going to be more competitive. When you look at what the bike was at Aragon, it had that little bit of ground effect on the aero, it had changes to the swing arm, it has new engine performance. It is just a step forward, and for the FIM, for the balancing rules, they've then got to take that into effect. And how are you going to be able to make those changes? You can see here for the fuel flow, there's changes for this weekend for Honda and for Yamaha, but has that had the desired effect on slowing down the Ducatis? It hasn't, and that's where we have to look to see what changes there are to be made for what you can do. And luckily that's well above my pay grade, because I'm not able to understand it, but for somebody within the FIM, they've got a big challenge to be able to try and find those balancing points, because this is about a balancing championship. This is production-based racing. It's not about prototype racing where the fastest survives. This is where it is the bike that's ultimately on sale on the road, a bike that has to deal with high road temperatures, low road temperatures, potholes, motorways, B roads. It has to deal with a lot of different things, and that's where different bikes have different requirements, whether it's the Ducati or the BMW versus the Honda or the Yamaha. And that's where the balancing is quite difficult to really find a fair solution across the board.
I've just seen Zach Monzaidi come over the line there. That is a time within the 105%, which is important for him because he wasn't earlier on in free practice one, as he just learns the ropes here in Manicourt. But just back to the Ducati and what the future looks like. Obviously, from a Ducati perspective, they'll be saying, well, look, we're bringing what ultimately is the best bike, and we've already got the best bike, we're bringing even better, and we don't want to be hampered. And obviously the ways of doing this have changed over time, because previously it was Jonathan Ray, the Kawasaki, rev limits, that was, you know, all the big talking points at the time was this is a penalty that hits one rider or hits one manufacturer in particular. But now the game has moved on, obviously, and it's Ducati who are going to feel it's us all the time who are potentially the most challenged by any limitations.
Yeah, and ultimately Ducati, it's not their ball, it's not their pitch. It's the FIM's ball and their pitch, and you play by the rules that there are. And it's up to Ducati and the other manufacturers in the MMSA meetings to have their discussions about how you're able to control that, how you're able to work together. But ultimately, when the regulations are made, it's up to each manufacturer to say, are they willing to accept it? And for Ducati, ultimately in the past, they have been willing to accept it. They've always been willing to put bikes out in the grid because this is how they're able to showcase what their road bike can do. And obviously they're able to show that in MotoGP as well, with what they're able to do with the bikes in MotoGP. But this is the bread and butter of Ducati, and it is frustrating for them. They're an engineering-led company, and they've always made that perfectly clear. But it's also where you're part of what everyone else is doing as well, and that is the challenging point, to be able to deal with all of those different ambitions for each manufacturer and what they want to do. And certainly whenever you look at it, that we have a price cap for what a bike can cost, 45,000 euros. Not every bike goes out and costs 45,000 euros to buy and have on the road. You look at the Yamaha with the R1. People want them to, but that's the realities of the world.
Just looking at the times, and we've seen Taz McKenzie cross the line last time around, a couple of tenths of a second down on his fastest time. We can see Axel Bassani cross the line here, 1:37.041, so new personal best for Axel Bassani and all but one rider. Tito Rabat has now improved on their times from FP1 earlier on today. But I just wanted to say, this is a great indication of how difficult it is for someone like Garcia, for example, coming in this weekend for his first weekend in World SBK, how tough he's got it, because Michael Ruben Rinaldi, obviously former race winner in the class, is 1.5 seconds down on P1 and he's 18th position. So it's really tough to make an impression with the timesheets as close as they are.
Yeah, it really is, and you look at the difference that a few tenths of a second makes, and certainly for Rinaldi, the 18th fastest rider that's won races in this class and being top 6 in the World Championship, if he finds half a second, he moves up pretty close to basically being inside the top 10, and then you look at it and say, oh, Rinaldi's having a great day. Half a second makes that difference, and half a second in the past wasn't that massive step, but now it is, and that's where it becomes so difficult for so many riders out there.
And actually, Alvaro Bautista said it to me a couple of times when I've talked to him about Superpole sessions, and he said, you know, it's even less than that. 1/10 can be 4 positions, and that's such a big swing on such a critical moment in the weekend as well.
Yeah, exactly, and the Superpole session is ultimately what conditions your whole weekend now, and if you qualify in those front few rows of the grid, you give yourself the chance to be able to have a really good weekend, and if you don't, you give yourself a lot of work to do, and you can see Buliga now coming across the line and showing the importance of those few tenths of a second.
Nicolo Buliga, fastest of anyone today by 4/10 of a second as well. That is a sensational lap from Nicolo Buliga. Faster even than the Superpole lap record set by Garrett Gerloff in 2023, a 1:35.453. Obviously, we didn't have dry weather conditions for that lap record to be broken last year, but that's astonishing from Nicolo Buliga. And all in the final sector as well, more or less. He was only a 10th up after 3 completed sectors on Top Rack's time.
Yeah, he's a 1/4 of a second faster in that final sector than anyone else has gone, and we can see Sam Lowe's coming through the 3rd sector. This is going to be interesting to see what he can do in the final sector, because there's only a few hundredths of a second between them, but it was in this final sector that Buliga made his big step.
Dave, Andrea Iannone just coming back out for what's going to be a very short sprint at the end of this free practice 2 session. I think we've got a bit of an update on what's been a tough session for him.
Yeah, it's been a tough day for Andrea Iannone in the Go 11 team. He's been reporting that he's not happy with the setup of the front end of the bike. They've kept changing the setup. That's why he's been back in several times, hasn't done as many laps in this session, just trying to find a setup for the front end that he is happy with here at Magny-Cours.
Thanks very much, Dave. And obviously that's all about having the feeling on the bike with which you can make lap time, so pretty critical for Andrea Iannone. He's down in 15th position. Meanwhile, another Andrea Locatelli moves himself up into P3, and that's ahead of Toprak Razgatlioglu with 2 minutes remaining here in free practice 2. So 4th rider into the 1:35s now today in Magny-Cours, and a decent effort for Locatelli.
Yeah, plenty of riders starting to put in fast times here at the end of the session, probably just doing a little bit of a run with those new tyres at the end of it, and we saw Jonathan Ray move up into 5th fastest before Locatelli moved on to the top 3 spots there, so good from Yamaha to be able to see that from Ray as well, but Locatelli there only 100th of a second slower than Sam Lowe's, and good time there from Lockie. You can see here traffic though, Garrett Gerloff just holding up Dom Jageter there into that final sector.
Yes, Gerloff 1.5 seconds down after 3 completed sectors, and he's now moved out of the way. Egerter coming through on a pretty fast lap, half a second down after 3 completed sectors. We'll see what he does now in sector 4. Alex Lowe's on an improved lap. Looked like Remy Gardner there might have run off the circuit altogether through the Lycée complex. We'll see if we pick him up in a couple of moments. 1 minute remaining there. Nicolo Buliga, your fastest man, a 1:35.428, 4/10 exactly faster than Sam Lowe's. Andrea Locatelli and Toprak Razgatlioglu, those 3 all covered by a 1/10 of a second. Petrucci 5th fastest, as you said. Jonathan Ray moving up into 6th. Alex Lowe's not improving in the end on that lap, albeit by a fraction. And here is a miserable end to a miserable day for Andrea Iannone, who has come to grief with less than a minute remaining in free practice 2.
Yeah, that looks gets down at turn 13, and obviously until they're able to clear that bike, the yellow flags will be out, which will mean that we mightn't see an improvement from Toprak here at the end of this session. So for Razgatlioglu, he's led the way for most of the day he's going to end up 4th fastest on the combined times.
Andrea Iannone just moving his way out of the gravel trap. So Razgatlioglu then should get this lap in, but it's not going to be an improvement anyway. He's 0.4 of a second down after sector 1 and losing another 10th in sector 2. So I suspect that the hot lap at the end wasn't his focus here. Alex Lowe's on to improve, and Dominic Egerter going again for another lap. We pick up Alex Lowe's now. The motor project, I think, in its first season has been a resounding success, hasn't it? And the fact that Lowe's, the last 3 rounds, has been there or thereabouts. A podium finish in Misano, front row at Donington Park. Quieter weekend in Balaton Park, but still 2 6th place finishes not to be sniffed at, given the number of independent Ducatis you're going up against and more experienced factory bikes as well.
Yeah, I think it's been a good start to the year for Bimota, good start to their project. But I think that for Axel Bassani, he's been the interesting one, because other than Misano, it's been a really tough season for him. And coming into the year, we had expected that he was going to make a big step forward. But for Bimota, as the year has gone on, there has been more and more of a difference between Lowe's and Bassani. And that's where, hopefully for Axel, he's able to make that step in the final third of the season, just to give himself a chance to get himself back to the front. Because we saw in Misano just how good he can be with that bike and package.
Yeah, have been a few opportunities for Bassani to prove his worth. 5th place in Assen, a 6th place in Moss, but certainly the last 2 rounds in particular, Donington Park and Balaton Park, as you say, Alex has had the upper hand there. Earlier in the season they were a little bit closer matched, and it certainly felt that Bassani can get more out of the Bimota than he was able to from the Kawasaki, where the margin was startling between the 2 of them last year.
Yeah, that's true as well, and I think that's where it becomes interesting to see what's going to happen within that team over the course of the winter, and what they're going to be able to do to try and help Bassani a little bit, because we have seen some good moments from him, particularly Misano whenever he qualified in the front row of the grid. But for Bassani, we've still seen it where that single lap qualifying pace has been the problem, and he's made a step forward compared to when he was on the Kawasaki, but he still would expect to be a little bit closer to the front than on that 5th or 6th row of the grid so often.
Yeah, it's a good point about Superpole, because the first 4 rounds of this season, Alex Lowe's didn't have good qualifying results, and you saw just how hard it was then to make up positions. The Bimota does have its strengths, but it also has a couple of deficiencies that makes it tougher for it to make its way through the field. And the last 4 rounds, Lowe's has been able to Alex just stand Sam up and out of the way, and Sam then gives a little bit of a gesture. So they're playing out there. They're certainly enjoying being on track together this season.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's that cool down to the pit slap from them right now.
As long as Alvaro Bautista doesn't get caught up in the middle of it, there we go. Yes, Sam and Alex. I was just saying about Alex, last 4 rounds much better in Superpole, and the results have been very evident, particularly in the race results of the last 3 rounds.
Yeah, exactly, and we've been able to see that over the course of the summer. And the 12 rounds of World Superbikes are very much split into those 3 groups of 4, and now we move into the final third of the season, and this is the business end where everyone starts to either wind down towards next year or tries to finish the season with that bit of momentum into the winter. And it's always an interesting time whenever we've got these 4 rounds so closely together.
And it's particularly felt like that this season, hasn't it? Because Bulliger's had the 4 rounds where he's been the man to beat, and then Toprak's had the 4 rounds where he's been the man to beat. So it really has felt like a season divided in 3 parts, and obviously the final third to come now after the summer break, which makes a sort of natural line in the sand.
Yeah, exactly, and here in Magny is the start of that. Aragon's always going to be a good round as well, but I love this Magny Core round. When we're here at the track, we always end up with great racing, and you'd certainly expect that that's going to be the case tomorrow. And Bulliger has shown with a lap record in this one that he's not going to go quietly against Toprak.
Yeah, very impressive. All-time lap record in World SBK for Nicolo Bulliger, set in free practice 2, a 1:35.428, 0.4 of a second faster than second fastest man, Sam Lowe's. But Sam again, second fastest this morning, second again this afternoon. Third place this afternoon goes to Andrea Locatelli, leaving Toprak Razgatlioglu out of the top 4, but I don't think he'll be unduly